The Satanic Verses. In 1988, a book came out that set the whole Islamic world on fire. A book that not only got banned in dozens of countries, but also got its writer on a death list. It was called The Satanic Verses. The writer, Salman Rushdie, looked like just a regular novel, but under the surface, something way deeper was going on. Rushdie told the story of a guy who looked a lot like the Prophet of Islam. And in these weird dreams, this guy met angels who weren't really heavenly, and not really from this world either. One of those angels was called Jibriel, like a mix between Gabriel and a made-up character. In the middle of all these dreams, a part of Islamic history gets rewritten. The part where some say the prophet was tricked by the devil and spoke some verses that were later removed. And people started calling them the Satanic Verses. But Rushdie took that old legend and threw it right into his story. And that was the spark that blew everything up. The book got banned fast in Islamic countries. People rushed into the streets and burned copies of it. And a year later, a fatwa dropped that shocked the whole world. Ayatollah Khomeini, leader of Iran, said Salman Rushdie had to die. Not just a threat, a real official fatwa to kill him. Since then, Rushdie lived like a free prisoner, moving house to house with bodyguards with fake names. His Japanese translator got murdered. His Italian publisher got stabbed. And the world split in two. Freedom of speech or insulting the sacred. Decades passed, but the drama didn't end. In 2022, Rushdie was on stage in New York. Suddenly, a man jumped out from the crowd and attacked him with a knife. He survived, but lost the sight in one eye. All that just for writing a novel. A book that's still banned in many countries. A book that some people say, if you read it, it'll poison your soul. This wasn't just a story. It was a line that shifted the border between faith and fear. And maybe even now, the Satanic Verses are whispering somewhere in the back of our minds. Mein Kampf. Back in 1923, after his failed coup in Munich, Hitler landed in jail. There, sitting in his cell, behind a wooden desk, he started writing. Not because he felt sorry, not because he was scared, but to map out the future he'd already pictured in his head. Mein Kampf wasn't just a biography, it was an ideological battle plan. A dictator's playbook. In those pages, he straight up wrote down all his racist beliefs. He called Jews the enemy within, and pushed for expanding Germany's borders, saying Germans deserved more land. Maybe the world didn't take him seriously back then, but a few years later, the same guy rose to power. And little by little, he did exactly what he wrote. That book became the Nazis' Bible. It was taught to young officers, read in schools, and there was a copy in every Nazi office. But after World War II, when the world saw the truth of the Holocaust and the death of millions, Mein Kampf became a symbol of pure hate. In Germany, it was banned for years. In Austria, just owning it could get you in trouble. In Russia, copies were seized. In lots of countries, people were even scared to read it, because it wasn't just a book. It was the start of a historical crime. But weirdly enough, the same book still sells today in corners of the internet and underground bookstores. Some folks call it a historical document. Others call it toxic and dangerous. And some still believe in it. Mein Kampf wasn't just one dark mind talking. It showed that words, when written with hate, can spill more blood than any sword. And that's when you realize, sometimes a pen starts a war that swallows tens of millions of lives. 1984. In 1949, just a few years after World War II ended, a British guy named George Orwell did something most folks were too scared to try. He imagined a world that sounded made up, but honestly, didn't feel that far from real life. In his book 1984, the world split into three big powers: Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia. The main dude, Winston Smith, lives in Oceania. That place is run by something called Big Brother. People there, they got no privacy. TVs don't just show stuff, they watch you too. Talking, thinking, even falling in love, all of it's gotta follow the rules. Break the rules, even in your head. Boom, you're busted for thought crime. Torture, brainwashing, then poof, gone. In that world, truth means nothing. What happened yesterday? It can change today. The government rewrites history. Ask questions? You're the bad guy. When the book dropped, smart people noticed it. But not long after, governments got mad. In the Soviet Union, banned. China, censored. Even in some US schools, too real to teach. And here's the wild part. Stuff in that book isn't even fiction anymore. It's in our daily lives now. Big Brother is watching you. Thought crime. Newspeak. Sound familiar? With phones listening, cameras everywhere, and apps that know what you want before you do, 1984's not just a story. It's a creepy warning that's coming true. And maybe the scariest part? By the end of the book, Winston stops fighting. He actually falls in love with Big Brother. Animal Farm. In 1945, George Orwell, who knew a lot about oppression, war, and political propaganda, decided to tell the truth in the form of a children's story. But this story had nothing to do with kids. Everything starts on a farm. The animals, tired of the farmer's cruelty, rebel. Led by two revolutionary pigs named Napoleon and Snowball, they rise up. The revolution wins. The farmer runs away. And the animals take over the farm themselves. The rules are simple. Everyone is equal. No animal should sleep in a house. No animal should drink alcohol. But slowly, the rules start to change. Napoleon, the power-hungry pig, pushes Snowball aside and takes over all the power. And every rule, bit by bit, gets twisted. In the end, only one sentence is left. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. The animals who started the revolution now stand against a new dictatorship. But this time, the dictators are one of them. And that's where the real tragedy is. Animal Farm was published when the Soviet Union was at its peak, and communist governments saw this book as a direct threat. In the Soviet Union, it was banned. In China, Vietnam, and North Korea, same thing. Even in some Western countries, in certain times, it was censored or restricted, because it was too clear. Governments are scared of Animal Farm, because after reading it, they stopped looking at slogans about equality and justice the same way. They realize power always gives itself more rights. And maybe the scariest part of this story isn't the pigs, not the changed rules, but the animals who saw it, understood it, but stayed silent. And that's when you realize, revolution doesn't always end in freedom. Sometimes, only the shape of the cage changes. Handbook for Rebels. In 1971, a writer named William Powell decided to go to war with the system, not with weapons, but with words. But the words in this book were more dangerous than any weapon. The book, written in plain and simple language, teaches how to make dangerous stuff. Pipe bombs, explosives, homemade weapons, chemicals, hacking tools, urban sabotage tactics. Basically, it's a full guide for rebellion, chaos, and tearing down public order. William Powell himself once said this book was his reaction to the U.S. government's violence in the Vietnam War. But what he wrote quickly got out of control. The anarchist cookbook fell into the hands of extremists, saboteurs, and terrorists. It was used in real attacks. It showed up in criminal cases as evidence. And soon, governments realized this wasn't just a book, it was a real threat. In the US, some states limited selling or owning it. In the UK, having it can get you locked up. In Australia, it's treated like smuggling. In Germany, publishing it is an official crime. Even online, PDF versions have been deleted over and over. But the saddest part of the story is the writer himself. Years later, William Powell said he regretted writing the book. He said he messed up, that it came from being young and angry, and he even tried to stop the book from being reprinted. But it was already too late. The book had become a legend in underground circles, extreme forums, the dark web. The Anarchist Cookbook is still banned, not because of what's in it, but because it's still usable. A book where every page could get someone killed. And maybe the only book that when you read it, it's not your mind that burns, but the world around you. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The story starts in the late 19th century. In the Russian Empire, the Tsar's secret police were looking for a way to distract public anger from the messed-up economic and political situation. They decided to create a fake enemy and point the finger at one group, the Jews. To do that, they made a fake document, a made-up text with a scary name, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This book pretended to be a secret meeting report from Jewish world leaders. In these fake meetings, they supposedly planned how to take over the world using banks, media, education, governments, and even art. They say the goal was to break families apart, destroy governments, and push civilization to collapse, so that in the end, a global Jewish empire takes over. But what's the truth? This book is a political fake. It was pieced together from older books, words were changed, stories twisted, and it was published like it was real. Still, once it came out, it spread all across Europe fast. In Nazi Germany, it became one of Hitler's propaganda tools. In the Middle East, it kept getting used for conspiracy theories. And even in some schools, it was taught as fact for years. In the U.S., the book was printed and spread by Henry Ford, millions of copies. And even today, on the dark web, extremist forums and anti-Jewish groups still quote it. But global organizations, historians, and researchers all agree this book is fake. Even the Russian government, years later, admitted it was made by the Tsar's secret police. And still, the protocols won't die. Maybe because this book isn't really about Jews. It's about something else. Fear. Fear of control, influence, of some hidden plan behind the scenes. And that's when you get it. A well-crafted lie can feel more believable than the truth. And sometimes one fake book can be the excuse for real bloodshed. The Catcher in the Rye. The book was published in 1951. The main character is a boy named Holden Caulfield, a confused, lonely, and rebellious teenager. He's been kicked out of school, and now he's wandering the streets of New York. He hates everything, the people around him, the adults, and the stupid rules of society. But what makes this book different is its tone. Holden speaks in a raw, rough, cuss-filled, honest way about whatever's going on in his head. And it's this bitter honesty that made teens love him and adults fear him. In the decades after, The Catcher in the Rye got banned in U.S. schools over and over again because of bad language, anti-family vibes, and its dark view on life. But the story doesn't end there. This book was named as inspiration in 3 real murder cases. In 1980, a guy named Mark David Chapman shot and killed John Lennon from the Beatles. When the cops arrested him, he was holding a copy of this book and said, "This book explains everything." In 1981, John Hinckley Jr. tried to kill U.S. President Ronald Reagan. And guess what? He'd read the book too. In 1989, another murder case in Canada had a killer who said he was influenced by the novel. Since then, this book became a weird symbol. Not just for angry teens, but for people whose minds were ready to explode. The Catcher in the Rye still isn't taught in a lot of schools. Some say it's dangerous, some say it's one of the deepest novels of the century, and some still believe it holds a secret code for certain people. Maybe the real reason people fear this book is because Holden Caulfield is like a lot of us. Distrustful, skeptical, tired of the fake world, just looking for a way to save something that's already gone. And that's when you realize some books, instead of calming your mind, wake it up. And a mind that wakes up is dangerous. The Da Vinci Code, year 2003. Dan Brown, an American author, published a novel that mixed codes, history, art, religion, and murder. But what set this book apart from a regular thriller was the claim behind it. The story kicks off with a murder in the Louvre Museum, and pretty soon the main guy, Robert Langdon, a professor of symbology, gets pulled into a multi-layered puzzle. Clues in Da Vinci's art, hidden messages, and secret societies. But the biggest twist in the book is where it reveals Jesus Christ was married to Mary Magdalene, and his bloodline still exists, and the church has been hiding it for centuries. Dan Brown, through this story, questions the Vatican, the Catholic Church, and the traditional structure of Christian faith. The book says groups like Opus Dei and the Priory of Sion either protect this secret or help cover it up. The reaction was wild. The Vatican called the book offensive and full of lies. In Lebanon, the book got banned. Churches across Europe wanted it boycotted. Religious groups took to the streets in protest. And still, people ran to get it. In less than a year, the book became the best-selling novel of modern times. And everyone had the same question. What if even 1% of it is true? The Da Vinci Code wasn't just a novel. This book took faith into the danger zone. It made people start rethinking Da Vinci's paintings, sacred texts, and church history with doubt. But the scariest part of this book wasn't the murders or the secret societies. It was the idea that even the holiest things might just be stories someone made up. And that's when you realize real power doesn't always come from truth, but from the story people choose to believe.